unless you're doing something different today than yesterday, you're not growing.
Hi Mridul, good evening and thanks for joining my channel today. It's been a long time. I hope you're doing well.
Absolutely, Ritesh. I'm doing well, and thanks for inviting me as part of your initiative. I really appreciate it.
Thanks Mridul, thank you for coming in and really appreciate you joining us all the way from the US. So Mridul, just to give you a background as to how will this conversation go ahead. So we'll kind of bifurcate this conversation into two parts. In the first part, we'll focus more about your professional journey in general, and then take a deep dive into some kind of industry understanding, because I believe you bring in a lot of rich experience in the healthcare sector, and that's how the conversation format will be. So I hope that you're okay with that, right?
Yep, absolutely fine.
Thank you so much. So Mridul, let's start with this conversation. So Mridul, I have known you for some years, and if I have to visualize about you, I can see Mridul is a person who has transformed himself from being a budding technical programmer to someone earning a leadership position in one of the biggest healthcare companies in the US. That's a remarkable journey in my opinion. My question to you, Mridul, is what was your strategy that helped you to bring you here? If you can help us understand that, that'd be great.
For the viewers or for the audience who are listening in, I want to make it as realistic as possible so they can relate with the story, they can relate with the strategy and what can be done even by a common person. I mean, we are not talking about the C-suite kind of a movement here or something on those lines, but a very, very normal, very basic story that would help them motivate. So as you said, I started my career as a technical programmer, but realized very soon that was not for me. Like I was like, okay, I have done IT, but is it the only option? Is it the only job or career option available that I can take up? So within a year, I realized that my passion, my interest is not in this area. So I wanted to move out of it, but what was the way out? So I thought, like, let me look around and see what other job opportunities are available in IT. And I see, like, probably a good way to start with is being a business analyst. But how do we become a business analyst? Right? Way back in 2005, 2006, it was very difficult to even start as a business analyst. It's much easier now. But at that time, it was very difficult unless you have an MBA degree or you have some kind of industry expertise or the other to your kitty, right? So that's where I tried my hands in public sector, because there you can just enter any sector giving a nationwide entrance and stuff like that. And that's where my journey led me to the Navratna firms, renowned firms in oil and gas sector. And when I applied for that, I was actually myself not sure whether I would be able to make it or not, because the competition was tough, right? I was one of the 29 folks selected out of 34,000 applications, but only to realize that I'm again ending up as a technical programmer in that role as well. After 7 to 8 months, I again tried focusing on what can I do now? And the other option that I had was going for an MBA degree. So coming back to your question of what was my strategy, I literally didn't have any strategy to begin with, Ritesh, to be honest. I just started to make my own way out of the obstacles that I was witnessing and making sure that I move ahead every day, one step towards the path of progress that I want to achieve. And there it is, like I was able to make into one of the best MBA colleges of the country, where my journey began as a business analyst finally. And imagine, like, this took me good 5 to 6 years if you also add my MBA tenure. But I didn't leave it there. I mean, I just wanted to keep progressing in my career, and from technology business analyst, I moved on to consulting, again based on the knowledge that I leveraged or knowledge that I picked up in defense and public safety sector. And there I realized that, okay, now this is the place where I wanted to be. I wanted to do consulting, I wanted to be in the service industry, and I'm in the right industry domain that has always ignited the passion inside me. So I started learning about a new industry, very quickly picked up, and realized after a few years that again it's going to a mundane life and I have to do something different to keep that spark up, Otherwise, it's like we are just doing job for the sake of it, and it's not a career for us, right? There's a difference between a job and a career. So that's where I realized that, enough of service sector. Probably I've done defense and public safety, health, industry and everything from a service mindset. Now, why not I move to a product-based organization and try my hands in there and see what I can do differently in that domain. And that's where I landed to this role. So overall, to summarize, strategy should always be look within yourself and see if that is something that you want to do at that point of time. If not, there lies the answer. You have to brush up your skills, you have to move forward, you have to get to the right networking, right contacts, and just keep moving up.
Wow, that sounds remarkable. And I think many times it's best not to have a strategy and go with the flow. And in the consulting world, as we say, it's best to learn while you run. So probably that's what you've done, and things got unfolded as you progress. So Mridul, that brings me to one very important question, and it talks about transformation. So and it's important to understand what is transformation actually about. So to my understanding, transformation is not an event, but it's a journey of continuous rethinking process and then improving yourself every day. So my question is, what are those tiny changes that you tried to observe and identify in your initial years that helped you to be here today and that had the most profound impact in your professional journey?
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up this question. It's a very interesting question and resonates with what I preach and practice every day. I keep telling my team members that unless you're doing something different today than yesterday, you're not growing. My messaging, or the way I saw it in my career, was I always tried to see how I can put a different lens to things around me and look it from a different creative angle, right? So for example, let's say when I was in my couple of earlier organizations, to be very specific, the oil and gas sector firm that I mentioned to you about, there were a lot of challenges with different strategic business units of that organization, and people were looking at that as from a very basic mindset, like, okay, we have to create an application and we have to just roll it out, deploy it to people. But no one was probably thinking about the change management behind that, for example, right? Will people accept that change? Will people who have never even properly used a computer would be able to use that application effectively and judiciously or not? So the transformation begins at every step, as you rightly mentioned. So from that perspective, where I learned how to deal with or how to be patient with users that are probably not at the same level as your understanding. And believe me, I keep learning it till date. Till date, I use some acronyms, subconsciously, without realizing that the other person might not be aware of it. What I'm trying to say is, every day is a transformational journey. Every day you learn something new. And if you leverage it to the best in your world and whatever you're doing, you'll be able to add value. So if I have to take it back and give some, practical insights to it, like let's say, look around you, see if you can use automation in some of the existing processes that you're leveraging. See if with the help of analytics, you can make the data more meaningful and present it to your leadership in a better way. So those things, we all have to be cognizant of and keep practicing in our day-to-day lives is my messaging. And that way we'll be able to transform our journey better.
Absolutely. I completely second your thoughts. I think transformation is all about identifying, like I said, those tiny changes every day, every moment, and that's how you can progress in life. So yeah, you rightly pointed out. So that brings me to my next question, Mridul, and now we'll talk about the healthcare sector. Healthcare sector is one of the largest and the fastest growing sectors in the world, and especially in the US, it's like a big thing. Now, what concerns me, despite seeing a lot of growth in the industry, in terms of cost, when I talk about US healthcare, somehow that's not in control. I mean, we do have all those innovations, we have good policies and frameworks, but somehow it's increasing dramatically year on year, right? What's your take on that?
So yeah, living in US, I am at both the ends, Ritesh, to start with, like both at the receiving end as well as at the giving end. I would say that it's an entire ecosystem, and we have to look at collectively, right? When I say an entire ecosystem, you have drug manufacturers, you have pharmacy benefit managers, you have the health plans, you have the providers and nurses and the clinical staff and everything. And there are a lot of layers in US, and every layer there are immense administrative costs that you bear to keep the system going. And when I say that, you would question me like, why is this not happening in the other countries? It is, but not at the scale with which it is happening in the United States. And why I'm saying that, assume you have a claim, right? You are a member and you see a provider, and your provider files a claim on your behalf. There are so many technicalities to the claim, like you have diagnosis codes, you have procedural codes whenever you see a doctor or visit a professional provider, that the doctors need to employ a lot of administration staff to even put together the details on the claim. Imagine. So you are giving your salaries to them, you're giving them incentives, then there is no control on drug manufacturing, for example. The private players can play according to the needs because the government regulations are not there. And you would ask why the government regulations are not there on drug manufacturing. The reason for that is, in US specifically, they do not want to compromise with the quality just because government is regulating the costs and giving to the people in economical measures. So they just want to not regulate this market completely. And there could be other reasons which we could definitely talk about, but at a high level, this has led to a huge gap in what the drug prices you see in US versus the other countries, right? Not sure if you're aware of PMPM costs. It's like per month, per member costs. So these costs are actually given to providers to serve members beyond their plans or beyond what they're paying for their insurance, so that if anything happens and something cannot be covered through their normal premium costs, there is an additional cost that government would give to the providers to keep the show going, right? Now what is happening is, you won't believe, for every 28 cents that is given to a provider on those costs, 1/3 just goes on for administration costs, for example. So how can you eliminate those? So there is a lot of process or a lot of food of thought, I would say, to improvise on certain processes. And I'm sure all of us as part of healthcare industry are looking towards it and doing our bit every day. But we are still not there. It's still a long way to go.
Okay, that sounds very complicated to me. But yeah, I do appreciate the fact that yes, these are the factors that might be contributing to the cost that we just talked about. So, Mridul, then interestingly, let me ask you this question. Given the fact that it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and so much of complications, cost factors, so many players in the ecosystem, what would be your advice to someone, maybe a professional, who is exploring healthcare as a career option?
Again, a very good question, Ritesh. And I would say that though the healthcare industry in US might sound to be very complicated, but for someone who wishes to enter this space, it's actually one of the easiest industries. And why I'm saying that, you actually live it every day, right? All of us need to go to a doctor, all of us need to do a health checkup. And if you think from a very basic standard in terms of how do you get enrolled to a new plan, to how do you receive your services from the provider, and how do you file your claims through provider, and how do you file appeals and everything, every one of us have at one point or the other gone through this process in our lives, right? So if you understand from the very basics what are the nitty-gritties and what are the areas of improvement that you yourself feel are important to have, you can start making the difference. Just realize or just understand or just be cognizant of the value drivers or the areas of improvement that you see on a day-to-day basis. And you can be innovative, believe me. and definitely contribute a lot to the sector.
Amazing. Great advice, Mridul, definitely. So, Mridul, I mean, that brings me to my last question, and probably the most important question. And it's very personal, I would say. So, we must retrospect, and if we do that, it helps us to understand, to rethink about the choices we've made in our life. Now, if I ask you hypothetically, if you were to go back in time and you are given an option to make some changes or to your choices, what will be those advices that you would offer to yourself, to your younger version?
Retrospect more and see what were the career options available. My focus was always on what job will make me happy. I never thought it from a career standpoint, right? And that was, many factors would have contributed to that. Maybe not that much awareness at that age, or probably I would not have done research enough to see how can I get into a business analyst role of my choice to begin with. But I could have done better. I could have talked to more people. I could have researched more and see, probably, I could have done my certification course in business analysis earlier than when I did, right? So there are a lot of things that I feel I can go back to my past and change on. But having said that, every experience is a learning, Ritesh. I mean, today I feel that since I started my career with the technical programming, I'm able to relate well with what can we achieve or what we cannot through an application. But I still believe that whatever I learned through my experience came a long way.
Awesome. I think it's about appreciating the difference between career and a job early on in life. Probably that would help someone to make the right choices. And you very rightly pointed out that it's important to explore all the options, keep an open mind, talk to people, and do right kind of courses, certifications, and then choose a path that really interests you. So yeah, I completely agree with you, and that very insightful thoughts you've provided, Mridul, and I'm very happy. That brings to the end of this conversation. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your time and sharing your thoughts and the insights that you've given. These are those invaluable lessons that we don't get in the textbooks, but we get from people who have had felt and have experienced in real life. So this is invaluable. So thank you very much. Any last closing comments from your side, Mridul?
I think this initiative of yours would be able to connect us with a common person, and that's why I wanted to talk about from my heart and share experiences that I actually went through or experienced in my career. So thank you for bringing up this platform for people like us who would definitely like to share the stories.
Thank you so much, Mridul. Really appreciate, and I'm sure we'll have more conversation around this. Yep. So look forward to that. Thank you once again, and I wish you a great day ahead. Thank you once again. Bye bye.
You too. Take care. Bye bye.